Hi, I'm Amy Wilhelmy, and this is Healing is a Messy Bitch. So, welcome back. Today, we are going to zoom out a little bit and talk about something that shapes therapy in ways we don't always notice, and that is culture. Now, when people hear the word culture, they often think about things like food, holidays, music, traditions, which is part of it, but culture also shapes something deeper. It shapes how we understand emotions, relationships, and healing. And sometimes in therapy, we forget that. Because a lot of psychological theories were developed in Western academic environments, which means we are shaped by Western cultural assumptions. But humans live in many different cultural systems, and those systems influence how people understand mental health. Culture and emotional expression. Let's start with something simple. How people express emotions, and in some cultures, expressing emotion is openly encouraged. Talking about feelings is seen as healthy. In other cultures, emotional restraint is valued. Keeping emotions private may be associated with maturity, strength, or respect. Neither approach is inherently wrong. They're just different cultural frameworks. But if a therapist assumes that everyone should express emotions in the same way, misunderstandings can happen. For example, a client who speaks quietly about their emotions might be interpreted as avoidant. But in their cultural context, that communication style might be completely normal. So, one of the goals of culturally responsive therapy is to stay curious about those differences. Culture also shapes how people interpret traumatic experiences. Trauma researchers often focus on nervous system responses like hypervigilance, dissociation, emotional dysregulation, but trauma also has social and cultural meaning. For example, experiences like discrimination, racism, or historical oppression can affect entire communities across generations. And some researchers refer to this as historical trauma or intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma refers to patterns of stress or emotional injury that can be transmitted across generations through family systems, community narratives, and social conditions. Understanding these broad contexts helps therapists approach trauma with greater sensitivity. Culture also shapes expectations around relationships. For example, some cultures emphasize individual autonomy. People are encouraged to pursue personal goals and independence. Other cultures emphasize collective identity, family obligations, and community, and roles may carry greater importance. Neither approach is universally correct, but they can create tension when people from different cultural backgrounds navigate them and navigate relationships differently. And this is something therapists often see in couples therapy. Which brings us to a theory we've talked about before called attachment theory. Attachment theory was originally developed by psychologist John Bowlby. It suggests that early relationships with caregivers shape how we experience emotional safety and connection throughout life. But even attachment patterns can be expressed differently across cultural contexts. For example, some cultures encourage children to develop independence early. Others emphasize close family interdependence, and both approaches can support healthy attachment in different ways. So therapists have to be careful not to assume that there is only one correct relational style. Another cultural dimension that often shows up in therapy is spirituality. For many people, spiritual beliefs provide frameworks for meaning, resilience, and healing. But historically, Western psychology sometimes dismisses spiritual experiences as irrelevant or even pathological. And that perspective is changing. Researchers are studying psychedelic therapies, meditation, and contemplative practices have begun recognizing that spiritual experiences can play a very important role in psychological healing. Some clients interpret their experiences through spiritual language. Others prefer psychological explanations. Both interpretations can coexist. The therapist's role is not to impose meaning, but to support clients in exploring what their experiences mean to them. So, how do therapists navigate all these cultural layers? One helpful concept is cultural humility. Cultural humility means simply acknowledging that therapists can never fully master every culture. Instead of assuming expertise, therapists approach cultural differences with curiosity and openness. Clients become collaborators in the therapeutic process. They can help explain their cultural background and how it influences their experiences. And this approach really strengthens the therapeutic relationship and creates space for deeper understanding. Another important part of cultural awareness is recognizing how identity shapes healing. People carry many identities simultaneously. For example, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, socioeconomic background, and each of these identities can influence how someone experiences the world. In therapy, exploring these identities can help the client understand the broader context of their emotional experiences. Healing often involves reconnecting with parts of the identity that may have been suppressed or misunderstood. If there's one idea I would love to leave you with today, it's this. Healing never happens in a vacuum. People don't enter therapy as blank slates. They bring their families, communities, histories, and identities with them. When therapists recognize these cultural differences and dimensions, therapy becomes richer and more responsive because healing is not just about an individual or the psychology behind it. It's also about connection, belonging, and meaning. Next time, we're going to shift gears a little and talk about the future of integrative healing. We'll look at how neuroscience, attachment research, trauma therapy, and even emerging psychedelic treatments are beginning to come together into a more unified model. And honestly, it's pretty exciting. It's such an exciting direction for mental health care, and I will see you there. Thank you.